message, which is evolution, emerging consciousness.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What a beautiful crowd this morning. It's so good to see so many people back. We miss you when you're not here.
We miss you when you're not here.
That feels really nice. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Wow. Well, I hope that you are feeling more peace, and we need to be the peace. We need to remember that, what are we transmitting each moment? What are we bringing? Even when things are difficult, what are we bringing? And remember to bring peace. Remember to breathe, and not bring our anxiety, not bring our fear. But just remember to calm that, right? Calm that anxiety, calm that fear. This morning I'm speaking on evolution. I'm speaking on another request. I don't know who wrote this one. Some of you signed your request cards for my talks. Some of you don't know this, but I did a survey a few months ago and I asked everyone to write a talk that they would like to hear on an index card. So if you haven't done that, please give me one. Or if you want to give me another one. I love what you wrote. I really love the requests. They're so thoughtful and they're just stretching me right and left and up and down. But I love the request for this particular subject, evolution and emerging consciousness and the times we live in. So Carl Sagan said that we are the representatives of the cosmos. We are an example of what hydrogen atoms can do given 6 billion years of cosmic evolution. Isn't that great? We used to be hydrogen atoms. Come on. It's fascinating. It's fascinating to look at the big picture of how far we've come and where we are, really where we are in our conscious evolution as conscious beings. It's really interesting to look at where we are. And to really look at where we are, we have to look at where we've come from, right? We have to look at where we've come from. Krishnamurti said, what religion someone holds, what race he belongs to, these things are not important. The really important thing is the knowledge of God's plan for humans. And God has a plan, and that plan is evolution, okay? So let's look at how far we've come. We've actually come a long way, baby. We have. Our first ancestors, our first human ancestors go back about 6 million years. Somewhere around 4 million years ago, we were walking upright. Somewhere around 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens, who we are, the modern day human, came into being. And then somewhere around 50,000 years ago, we really took a leap in evolution. And you know why? Can you tell me why? Because our brain size increased. And you know why our brain size increased? This is what's so fascinating to me. Our brain size increased because we had more complex problems to solve. We had more complex social problems to solve. And that's what made our brain size increase. Isn't that interesting? Because if you really take that in, then maybe that's what's happening now. Maybe we have some really complex problems here to solve, and it's going to inspire our brain growth. It is inspiring our brain growth. So it's kind of interesting when you step back and look at the big picture. It's not all as it seems. There's more to it. So we about 50,000 years ago, our temporal lobes grew, and we developed the capacity for language. And I was thinking about our capacity for language is so amazing. We communicate in so many ways. I mean, not just speaking. We communicate in what we don't say. We communicate in how we look at each other. That look in the eyes. We communicate in music. We communicate in art and dance. so many ways that we communicate. So it's fascinating to think of how complex our capacity is for communication. So you're probably wondering, are we still getting smarter? Are you wondering if we're still getting smarter? Well, I love to research, and I came upon a Harvard professor, Steven Pinker. He wrote a really great book. Oh, you know of Steven Pinker. He wrote this great book called Enlightenment Now. And when I found him, I've been watching videos of him all week. I've been watching hour-long lectures, and I'm so inspired. Highly recommend watching Steven Pinker. But he says we are getting smarter. And we're not getting smarter, just getting smarter, but that we are progressing in every way. We're progressing in every way, especially in our intelligence. He says that our IQ scores are increasing by 3 points a decade, and so our IQ has increased 30 points in the last 100 years. That's a lot. He says, and it's a good thing, because we got some complex problems to solve right now, but we certainly have the intelligence. We have the intelligence to solve them. You know, and a big problem we need to solve is we need to get the government out of the hands of corporations. And we can't. We need to solve mass shootings. And you know what? Let's just take away the assault rifles. Who needs them?
Amen.
Who needs them? I have to say this. They're just for killing. We don't need them. I'm not anti-gun. My family has guns. You know, that's okay. They can have their guns, but they don't have assault rifles.
Amen.
We don't need them, okay? I think there was, you know, Australia was having problems with mass shootings, and they got rid of their assault rifles, and they don't have problems with mass shootings now, okay? Simple solutions like that, okay? We have the intelligence to do it. But back to the bigger picture. The big picture, if we look at the bigger picture of how far we've come, it's really inspiring. It's really inspiring. We've grown, we've evolved. Think about it. We've gone to the moon. We've explored Mars. We're able to replicate organs. We're able to make noses and ears and bladders, and pretty soon, probably hearts. We're creating all these great spare parts. Anybody got a new knee? Got a new hip? New shoulders? Heart valves, pacemakers?
Oh yeah.
What? Teeth? Yeah, teeth. You're doing that? Wow. And certainly because of all that, we have grown. We have grown substantially in our longevity. Our life expectancy has grown. We've grown in world prosperity. I found that interesting. 200 years ago, 90% of the world's population lived in extreme poverty. 200 years ago. You know what the figure is now? 9%.
Wow.
That's an improvement. We need to realize that we have improved, and we've got further to go, you know, no doubt about it. There's more democracies in the world right now than there have ever been, okay? There, in the last decade especially. Back in the 70s, there was more communistic and dictatorship societies, okay? So we have improved there. The death penalty has been hugely decreased around the world. Homosexuality is more accepted around the world. Child labor has nearly been eliminated. All forms of violence have declined. 100 years ago, homicide rates were 5 times higher. And that's a little bit hard to believe with all this, you know, mass shooting, but that's the figures. Every part of the world has seen progress in education, even in Africa and the Middle East. The quality of life has improved. The typical work week 100 years ago was 60 hours. Now it's less than 40. 71% of countries have increases in happiness in the last 30 years.
Amen.
What's interesting, though, is the U.S. isn't among them. But Pinker says that we were pretty happy 30 years ago, so, you know, but interesting, yeah, interesting figure there. So Pinker says his research shows we're living in a time of greater peace overall. You know, and The chance, he says, of dying right now from war is less than we've had in 1,000 years. So I don't want to paint too rosy a picture. I don't want to try to paint too rosy a picture. But, and, you know, there is clearly a lot of work to do, especially after the news yesterday. It's just in our face and it's so painful. But we can solve the senseless gun violence. We can eradicate war from the face of the earth. We can. We have the intelligence. We have the wisdom. We can encourage every nation to disarm all nuclear weapons. We need to do that. We need to do that. And we can encourage, you know, we can deal with climate change. We have the knowledge. We have the ability. Can I hear an amen?
Amen.
Thank you. Let's do it. Let's get educated. Let's have confidence and let's act, you know. Reading Pinker's research really uplifted me. I needed it, and it really uplifted me. And, you know, when you watch him, I really want to meet him. I'm going to find a way. I might just write him, because I want to know if he was optimistic, if he was just an optimist before he did this research, and did that sort of slant his research, or did he become optimistic after the research, because it's so optimistic. It's really optimistic. And we need that.
Amen.
Yeah. He shared a great quote in one of his talks about, you know, when people lament about the good old days. He said, Franklin Adams says, nothing is more responsible for the good old days than a bad memory. I thought that was something to think about. Part of why I wanted to share this research today is because we can become pessimistic about the direction of the world. And when people get pessimistic, they can get fatalistic, and that's not healthy. Because from fatalistic, you can just kind of, and I think this is part of what's happened, you can drop into this attitude, well, let's just burn the whole thing to the ground, right? Let's just burn it down, it's not working. And that is so lacking reason. There's a lot of good. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you for, like, let's place our attention on all the good. There's so much good. I have my websites. I might read CNN just to get the headlines, but I go to alma.org and I see all this love and I see all this healing and I see all these good things happening, and there's so much good happening. So to progress, to keep evolving, we need reason. We need people with sanity, people with knowledge, people with heart, people who can see the big picture. People who know how to cultivate peace, okay? Pinker says we need to also remember that the problems of yesterday were worse. And you can see a lot of examples of that if you really think about it. So I know for many of us, the present state of affairs feels like things are getting worse. But here's what I want to ask you. Are things getting worse, or are they getting uncovered? Can I hear an amen?
Amen on that one.
Thank you. We're getting a little evangelical this morning.
Easy now.
We've got a lot of conditioning to overcome. That's really what we're dealing with. A lot of conditioning, a lot of ignorance getting passed down and then getting amplified. We've got a lot to overcome, but Nelson Mandela, one of my heroes, he said, this is probably one of my favorite quotes of all time, I'm not going to cry. He said, no one is born hating another because of the color of his skin, or his background, or his religion. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love.
Amen.
Love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. Oh, truth, pure truth. So we're in the midst of something bigger. It's bigger than any current social or political upheaval. We are in the middle of the evolution of humanity. And we have to remember the big picture. We each have a role to play. Every one of us in this room has a role to play. every one of us is an important cell in this body of awakening consciousness. So think about how you've evolved in your life. You know, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about what really made me evolve, and when did I really have those growth spurts in my own life? And when I thought about it, I thought, you know, some of my biggest lessons were from making big mistakes. Think about it. Don't you see that?
Yeah.
You know, not always, but some of them, wow, yeah. We grow by making mistakes, by seeing them, and by changing our behavior, don't we?
Amen.
We're all an example of that. Our life is an example of that. So it works the same way collectively, and I know it can seem so painfully slow, right? Evolution can seem so painfully slow, but come on, we started 6 million years ago. Have patience! For God's sake, have some patience. I will admit that I am an eternal optimist. I'm an optimist, and I know we can pull through and will pull through this very hard time in our country. I know we will. Another quote from Nelson Mandela. He says, "I am fundamentally an optimist, and part of keeping optimistic is keeping one's head pointed towards the sun and one's feet moving forward." He says, "There were many dark moments when my faith in humanity was sorely tested, but I would not and could not give myself up to despair. That way lies defeat and death." You know, that was said by a man who spent 27 years in a prison cell, you know, and he became one of the greatest leaders of the 20th century. So I want to tell you I want to give you a little synopsis about the life of Nelson Mandela, because it's just so inspiring. You've probably seen that wonderful movie. Well, there's been a number of movies. But just to tell you, in case you don't know, or just to review, when he was about 30 years old, South Africa was taken over by a white nationalist party. And it was they institutionalized racism. They institutionalized segregation and basically slavery. And he was a young activist, and he fought that, and he was put in prison. He was tried and he was put in prison with a life sentence. And they called it apartheid, right? Is that how you say it, apartheid? Some people say apartheid, but while he was in prison, he became a symbol, an inspiring symbol for anti-apartheid. And then, you know, he wrote letters and he encouraged, you know, the resistance. And this went on for some time, and the White Nationalist Party came and visited him in prison, and they asked him, you know, if you would just tell your followers, because you're really popular, just to acquiesce, you know, and just accept this racist government. And he was like, no. And he would not. And so they were going to let him out of prison if he would. But he wouldn't. And that's why he stayed in prison 27 years. But he did get out of prison, and you know what happened when he got out of prison? He became the first black president of a multiracial government in South Africa.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah, and he won the Nobel Peace Prize. And he was known for how kind he was to the white people, who were the minority, right? He was all about reconciliation. He was such an amazing, powerful leader, and I was so inspired to read about what he did in his time in prison, because they say he went in angry and he came out wise. He used that time not to become bitter. He used that time to become wise, and he got a hold of Norman Vincent Peale's book, The Power of Positive Thinking. And there's some letters that he wrote his wife about this power of positive thinking. And he said, it's not so much the disabilities one suffers, but one's attitude towards them. The man who says, I will conquer this illness and live a happy life is already halfway there.
Amen.
And he was inspired by St. Paul, not surprisingly, because Paul wrote from prison, right? He said of the biblical saints, there's a beautiful quote, where is it? He said they visualize a new world where there will be no wars, where famine, disease, and racial intolerance will be no more. Precisely the world for which I'm fighting.
Amen.
How beautiful.
Amen.
So he was a hero. We love heroes, and he was a hero. He was a great man. Great beings show us how to love. Great beings show us how to respect all people. Great beings show us how to live in integrity and dignity. They show us how to fight for justice. They show us how to forgive, and they show us how to never give up hope. Never give up hope. He said, I never lose. I either win or learn. Remember that. I never lose. I either win or learn. He also said, may your choices reflect your hope, not your fear. Let our choices reflect our hope, not our fear. So, how do we respond to the times we live in? How do we respond to the times we're in right now? Well, if we follow Nelson Mandela's advice, we move from hope, not fear. We do not let ourselves give up to despair. And we turn our mind to the power of positive thinking. If you could do that in prison, we can do it now. We have better conditions than he had. And I would say we have to take care of ourselves. Because this business of evolution, of human evolution, it is a marathon, not a sprint. And anxiety and fear are too pervasive. You know, I can just hear it in people's voices. I have more people coming to me for counseling than I have ever had. And I myself, I deal with a little more anxiety and fear than ever because I'm sensitive. I feel the oneness, you know. I tune into the collective. But I know how to take care of myself. And we have to take care of our limbic system. You know, I feel like what we've got in America right now is we have a lot of people reacting from their limbic system. That's the fight. My position's right. The fight or the flight. I gotta move to Canada, right? Right? The fight or flight. That's the limbic system. That's the amygdala part of the brain. We have to learn how to calm that. We have to learn to make peace something that we sustain, that we live on a daily basis. One day at a time, let's sustain peace. Just for today, let's sustain peace. And then tomorrow, we'll work on it, you know. But we have to be more conscious is to be able to sustain peace. And to do that, we do have to take care of our limbic system. We have to know how to breathe, how to let go, how to relax. We need to stop taking in pessimistic news, pessimistic friends, pessimistic thoughts. Pessimistic. Pessimistic, too. We have to watch the content of our minds because if we keep repeating a pessimistic story, that's going to just hammer our limbic system. That is going to just keep us in that fight or flight, and the anxiety is not going to leave. I thought of a gadget I want to create. That, you know, if to meet what's happening in our world, we have to meet what's happening in our mind. And I thought of a gadget, a consciousness-raising gadget that I want to create. I got to find some really smart techie person, and it's something that you would wear, and it would record every thought you have all day long. And at night, this is chapter 1 in the consciousness raising book I'm going to write. You have to review those thoughts. Now, the first night, you might be really shocked to see every thought that you thought all day long, right? And then the second day, you're probably going to be really shocked, and you're probably going to be shocked at the repetition too. By the third day, you know, you might start going, "Wow, this has got to change." Well, by the end of the week, you know, you're going to have a lot of insight. And so chapter 2 is going to be, now you have to take the thoughts that are of the past and future and cut them in half. Because the past is usually lamenting about what happened, it was good or it was bad. The future is usually worrying. So you learn to be in the present. So you cut your thoughts in half that are past and future, and you double your thoughts that are present. Okay, chapter 3. Next week, you take all the thoughts that are chronically negative, that are chronically critical, that are chronically why you can't, and judgmental and limited, and you cut those in half. And you double the thoughts that are actually creative solutions. You see? This is how we become more genius. This is how we become a more contributing human being. Thank you. Well, here's the thing. Maybe we don't have that exact gadget. No, I'm going to work on that. I truly am. But we have something called mindfulness training. And it's the same thing. It's not as convenient as that gadget. It takes a little more work. The gadget would make it easier. But we can start to watch the content of our mind. We've got to watch the content of our mind. And we've got to change it. And as soon as you find yourself going down that runaway train of thoughts, how it's all going to pot, change that story. Notice that. Notice what it's doing to your limbic system, to your nervous system, to your energy level. You know, here's what I do. I work most days till about 5 o'clock, and then I get up and I go to the lake, and I walk at the lake, and I walk about 2 miles in the forest. And as soon as I'm on that dirt path, I feel the energy of the earth. I feel it coming into me. I feel it changing me. I look up at those trees, and those trees are singing that beautiful song. They're whispering, peace, be still. They know how to be still. They know how to be. It can be anything else but just trees being. And they teach me. And there's flowers blooming, and they bring me joy. And I do that walk, and then I jump in that lake. And oh, I jump in that lake, frozen, it's melted, snow. And I just feel all this prana. Every cell wakes up, and I feel alive, and I feel delight. And then I bring that to the world. I bring that here to you. I bring that to my family. I bring that to my loved ones. I bring it to my community. This is what we must do. We must focus on what brings us peace and bring that. Bring that.
Amen.
So take time to soothe the mind and heart. Walk on the earth, look at the sky, connect to this vast universe that is so much bigger than your collection of thoughts that's creating anxiety for you right now, okay? Yes, we have big problems to solve, but we have more of humanity waking up now than ever before, okay? So I'm closing. Please remember, we have come so far. We have come so far, okay? We are here to learn, and we are learning. And what needs to be uncovered is being uncovered, okay? We don't have to fix the world all at once. I'm going to say that again. We don't have to fix the world all at once. As my spiritual teacher has said to me so many times, don't worry about all the darkness in the world. Just light your one little candle and let it shine. Thank you.